If you're also walking this grief journey like I am, and your grief doesn't feel as loud as it used to in the beginning, that doesn't mean that your love has faded. It just means that you're learning how to carry it a little bit better every single day. Welcome to A Catholic Journey. I'm your host, Jessica Diaz. If you're grieving, searching for hope, or just beginning to explore your faith, this is a place for honest conversations, real struggles, and the peace that comes from drawing closer to God. Let's walk this journey together. Welcome back to a new episode of A Catholic Journey. Something that's been on my mind lately, and I think a lot of people don't talk about, is what happens in the grief journey after the intensity starts to fade. So when you first lose someone that you really love, everything feels elevated, right? Your emotions are heightened, you're planning a funeral, you're navigating friends and family, you're dealing with legal paperwork. And let me just say, there's so much legal paperwork that no one prepares you for, especially if your loved one didn't have a plan set in place. And so you're doing all these things simultaneously while your heart is broken. So everything just feels intense, right? Because you're carrying this grief and all of this responsibility at the exact same time. But what a lot of people don't talk about is that eventually life goes back to normal. Eventually, all those heightened emotions start to fade back to normal. And I remember that being a really weird feeling for me at the time. There was a point after my mom passed away, I remember I had to take my kids to school one morning, and my dad was still in the hospital with a not so great diagnosis. And there I was driving in my car bright and early to do a regular school drop-off day. And I remember just thinking, is this real life right now? How is the world just continuing to exist? Because when you're in this space, this heavy grief space, all of the emotions, all the things you have to do, it just feels like the world should stop, right? Like, why is everyone living life like normal? But life doesn't stop, right? It has to keep going. And so eventually, after the funerals pass, after all the condolences slow down, and after all the paperwork starts to wrap up, and after the days of intense crying that feel like they're never going to end, they eventually do. And life just goes back to normal. And it doesn't mean that it gets better. It's normal, but it's different. And it doesn't mean that the grief is gone. It just means that your days get a little bit quieter. You start to get back into your routine. For me, I noticed that I just wasn't crying every single day. I wasn't in this constant mental fog. I still had this heavy weight on my chest every day, but it just wasn't as intense or as loud. And in the beginning, I used to feel really guilty about that. Like somebody would say something funny and I would laugh, and I would get this lump in my throat at the same time because I felt like, am I being a bad daughter because I'm laughing at this right now? Does this mean that I don't love them anymore? Is the person whose joke I'm laughing at think that like I'm over it and I don't care that my parents passed away? And if you're in that season of your grief right now, I just want you to know that the answer is no. You're not doing anything wrong. You're not being a bad daughter or son or spouse or sibling. It just means that you are learning how to carry your grief. And something I realized during that time, as I was going through the beginning stages of grief and I was diving into my faith at the same time, I realized that faith can feel the exact same way. I want to pause for a second and share something with you. If you've been enjoying this episode and you're feeling like you want more structure in your relationship with God, my friend Audrey and I created something just for you. It's called The Daily Thread. And it's really for those of us who feel like we're constantly juggling everything, and faith can sometimes feel like just one more thing on the list. Stop trying to fit God into your life and start building your life around Him. That's what The Daily Thread is all about. Each month, we provide a workbook based on the daily Mass readings with reflections to help you integrate your faith into your everyday life. You can sign up at thedailythread.co and follow us on Instagram at Daily Thread Podcast for more updates. All the details are in the show notes, and we would love to have you join us. Now, back to the episode. So right after my parents passed away, I had mentioned before that I felt this intense calling from God to go be with him and sit with him. And it was a very intense feeling. Like I felt God calling on me. I didn't audibly hear him, but I felt him in my heart calling me. And it was emotional. It was a powerful feeling. And so I would show up to church and I would sit with him and I would cry, and I was trying to figure out how to pray, and everything just felt so intense. And over time, as I started to settle more into my faith journey and find a rhythm, that intensity wasn't always there. It also settled. I wasn't breaking down every time I went to Mass. My prayers weren't as intense as they were in the beginning. Some days just felt normal. And I think when you're going through this faith journey, that can also feel confusing, right? Because we oftentimes associate very strong emotions with very strong faith or a very strong love. And so if I'm not feeling this intense feeling, is something wrong? Am I drifting from my faith? But I think just like grief, the fading of the intensity doesn't mean that the love is gone. It doesn't mean that you're over it. I still love my parents. I miss them deeply every single day, and I still love talking about them. It's just not this overwhelming feeling that consumes me every single day. And going through this faith journey is kind of similar. Just because you don't feel something super intense every time you pray or every time you go to church, it doesn't mean that God stepped away from you. And it also doesn't mean that you stop praying. And it also doesn't mean that you stop showing up. If anything, it means you need to stay the course. I think this was something I learned in my OCIA class, but I don't remember exactly when this hit me. But I started to realize that in the quiet moments of my faith, it's not that God is far from me, but actually it's an invitation. It's an invitation to continue walking this journey with him, to continue implementing my faith in my life and showing up and sharing that with my family. And that also means that there are some Sundays that I just don't feel like going, but I still show up. You know, the intense feeling of grief, once it subsides, it doesn't mean that the love you had isn't there anymore. And it's the same thing with our faith. We don't have to have this constant, intense emotion for our faith to be real. It is still real. And sometimes our most faithful days are just a regular Tuesday when you wake up and you pray and you make time for the Lord and you love on your family and you do your chores and you just do your best. Those days are just as powerful and just as important as the overly emotional ones, where you feel intense in God's presence and the Holy Spirit. The first time I experienced this shift of emotions in my faith was after I completed my OCIA program and I received my confirmation. So leading up to the actual confirmation, I was on literal fire. I had been attending my OCIA classes for months every Sunday, and it was this constant feeding of my soul, right? And diving into my faith. And I just felt this like huge excitement about it. And it was a big deal, right? It was this ramp up to this moment that I was just so excited for. And then I did my confirmation, and it was a beautiful ceremony. And then it was over. The classes ended. The big day was over. I started to feel myself go into this space of almost like, God, where are you? We were on fire a week ago together. Why does it feel so quiet right now? And that's when I learned that especially in those moments where you feel farthest from God, that's when you have to continue. And so I kept showing up for church. I started praying my rosary more. I stayed connected with my friends from my OCIA team, so much so that I joined the team, but that's a story for another day. But I continued on this path that God led me to. I didn't give up. I didn't say, well, I don't feel this fire anymore, so I guess that's it. I'm going to keep doing what I was doing before. I stayed the course. And so there are days where my grief feels really loud, and there are days where my faith feels loud, and there are days where everything just feels quiet. But when those quiet days happen in your faith, that's when you have to lean in. That's when you have to remind yourself that just because I'm feeling this way does not mean that God is not there for me. Those quiet moments is when you stay the course. You don't make intense changes in your life. You don't try to restructure your prayer life. You stay the course and just take it one day at a time. So I want to leave you with this question for today's episode. Has your faith felt quieter lately? And if it has, instead of assuming that something is wrong, that God is not there with you, can you see it as an invitation to continue showing up, to continue trusting God, and to continue this faith journey that He has called you on? Because quiet doesn't mean absent. It means you need to keep going. And the same goes for your grief. If you're also walking this grief journey like I am, and your grief doesn't feel as loud as it used to in the beginning, that doesn't mean that your love has faded. It just means that you're learning how to carry it a little bit better every single day. I want to thank you once again for walking this faith and grief journey with me. I appreciate it so much, and it means the absolute world to me. And as always, feel free to share this episode with someone you think needs to hear it. I'll see you in the next episode. God bless. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps others find the podcast and become part of this community. Until next time, remember, where Jesus leads the way, we are called to follow.